Today, we want to do a couple of things. A lot of the audience is obviously fairly familiar with keywords, but not everybody is. So I'm just going to do a very, very quick intro to keywords and use that as a little bit of a way of situating the art business within keywords, because today is really all about art. It's an opportunity for you to hear from one of our 6 service lines about the work they do and what's driving their success. Keywords, just to remind everybody, we're a services provider. We provide essential services to the video games industry at all stages of production. Not quite at all stages of production yet, but we intend to be at all stages of production. That starts with art, moves through to audio production, to localization, functional QA, localization QA, which is language testing of the assembled multi-language versions of the game, and through to customer experience, customer support, and community management. The importance of this is really to remind people that this is quite circular now. So the games industry has moved dramatically over the last 10 years, certainly the last 5 years even, from being a packaged product sort of industry to one where the assets live in live, and the name of the game now is keeping players engaged within that content, and that means continual supply of content. So our services play throughout the life cycle of the game. Our strategy is to make Keywords the global go-to provider and to selectively consolidate what is a very fragmented industry. And the gentleman that we'll be presenting later is part of the proof of that. So quick reminder, games market, $90 billion. Forecast here from Newzoo, there are other forecasts out there, shows that the market will grow, I think it's about 6 or 8% per year, and end up at about 118, 119 billion. Obviously, you can see within that there are a number of different segments of the market, not all of which are growing at the same rate. Mobile, in particular at the bottom, is driving a lot of growth. What I don't see here is any forecast for virtual reality and augmented reality. So what I've seen so far is that most people are talking about that coming on top of these numbers. Personally, I think there will be some substitution. What we've achieved to date, so you saw our strategy, this consolidation. We need to make ourselves a global player, and we've achieved a lot since we came to market. So to remind people, we've only been public since July 2013. In fact, we finished 2013 as a year with revenues of 16 million euros. And we had 5 locations at the start and actually at the end of that year. So from there, we've now got 24 locations. Our revenues are up to, I think this year the analysts now have got us around about 93 million. And our headcount's gone from a couple of hundred to close to 2,000, in fact, a bit more than 2,000 headcount as of today. So we've achieved a lot in a small space of time, not only through acquisition, although that's a big part of it, but also very importantly through some very robust organic growth. We enjoy a market-leading position in some of our service lines, despite the fact that I personally think we're not very big in them. We have leadership in some of those spaces. But very importantly for us, our clients are really read like the who's who of the video games industry. So 21 of the top 25 game companies and 7 out of the top 10 mobile game companies. We live in a sort of dynamic marketplace. There's a lot going on in games. One of the things we showed you earlier, and I advise you to go and experience it if you haven't already, was virtual reality. So virtual reality is big news this year. What we're seeing in the marketplace is it's great. It's bringing us additional revenues. Some of that is already, we can see, is substitutional with other work that we're doing. And it is disturbing a little bit the normal rhythm of activity in particularly our AAA client base, as resources are kind of diverted into trying to figure out what to do in virtual reality. I think that'll settle down probably towards the end of 2017 and into 2018 once people have worked out what the right recipe for virtual reality and augmented reality is. It reminds me a little bit of the early days of mobile games, actually, which leads me on to the next point, which is that the other thing that we're seeing a lot of, and Ashley in particular from Mindwalk is seeing it, is that In the mobile side, the level of content is growing, so we're getting a lot more 3D art in mobile than ever before, and again, that's powered by the power of smartphones. And with that as well is coming audio. So some interesting trends and opportunities for us. So situating art within the Keywords business, as I said, it's one of 6 service lines. We're fortunate in that we work on some tremendous IPs. This is only a very small sprinkling of them, and I think as we go through the presentations, you'll see some more, at least clients, if not actual games mentioned. We manage our businesses, as I think some of you know, through service lines. So each service line has a head of the service line, and that person is responsible for the strategy for the service line. They're responsible for all the resources that go into that, and they're responsible for the profitability of the service line at a gross profit level, leveraging the infrastructure, the geographic capabilities, the local knowledge of the regional and country management and studio management structure. So with art there, picked out in a slightly different color, Fred Stockton runs that business, and the people sitting at the table are part of his management team. And who are the people at the table? We have 4 art companies in Keywords, and it's worth saying that this service line for us is a bit unique. All of this has been built through acquisition, and then we've encouraged those businesses to grow from here, and you'll see that as we go through the presentations. So it started with Luxor in October 2014. That was the beginnings of our art services business. We then added Liquid in August 2015, Mindwalk in April 2016, and very recently in July 2016, Volta, which is headed by Claude. Our business, obviously, and here I'm showing you not annualized revenues, but actual reported revenues for the art business. And I'm not telling you what the number is for 2016, but you know, the direction of travel is positive. You can see the growth in the businesses that have been acquired, and also the growth in terms of the percentage of art of the total business. So as of half 1 2016, that represented 16% of our business. This was a slide that I found only very recently, and in fact you can see from the source it's as recent as a couple of days ago. But what it highlights to me more than anything else, and this is all about digital content in games. This has got nothing to do with packaged product in game. It's purely digitally delivered content. Is that you can see from 2016 to 2020 the growth in the what's called DLC and virtual goods. DLC is downloadable content, and virtual goods is the stuff that you buy or trade online. So it's weapons, it's armors, it's hairstyles, it's clothes, it's football shirts, it's football players, whatever. All of these are art assets which get traded, and there's money in it. So we go from 60 billion or 61 billion to 83 billion in 4 years. That's a tremendous driver for the business that you're going to hear from today in terms of art. The value, the way our clients monetize what they do is entirely through content. You can't monetize anything else. So it's all about content generation. So we're going to hear in the following order, if I can get it right. We're going to start with Claude Bordelot from Volta, who's CEO of Volta. He's going to take us through a little bit of the history of art, what it's like to generate great art and why that is so important, and particularly give us a little insight into concept art, which is a new discipline that's come to Keywords through the acquisition of Volta. We're then going to cut across to Fred Stockton, who heads our art business worldwide. He actually joined as CEO of Liquid Development and then accepted the challenge of running the whole show. And Fred's going to give us a little bit of background in terms of the drivers for art and what's behind you know, our clients engaging with us. He's going to pass the baton on to Ashley Liu from Mindwalk in Beijing, and Ashley's going to give us a flavor for the fact that creating beautiful art is what we do, but the way in which we do it is a business. This is a business, and she will be sharing with you some of the challenges and some of the tools and techniques that are used in our business to make sure that we not only do great art, but we make money by doing great art. And we're going to wrap up with, almost wrap up, because I'm going to do the wrap up eventually, but we're going to go to Manvendra Shukla from Laksha, CEO of Laksha, the first company to join Keywords. And Manvendra is going to actually give us a case study, very specific case study about his own experiences at Laksha in growing, taking a business that was kind of all there and how he managed to make that grow as part of Keywords. And the growth story is fantastic. So I'm going to hand over to Claude for his section.
Hello, everyone. So I'll talk to you a bit about art and how we see it in our business. So this is a quick history of art as a business. So it's not everybody who knows about it, but when art started as a business, it was for religion. So when we talk about, for example, Leonardo da Vinci, it was a studio, actually. It was a business. He had assistant, and it started very early. Then quickly it became a shift to publishing, and where you had as a client the magazine and newspaper. Then all the best artists came to advertising then. You had all those famous painters like Leyendecker, or like the big advertising agency were hiring these guys, making them paint. So all the best artists were going there. And it was still fine art, because you see that in museum these days. And then with Disney first, with movie, then with video game, you had the entertainment business. And nowadays, the best artists, the fine artists of tomorrow, are all working in that field. So that's what we are seeing now. When you look at the history of the visual and video games here, you can tell that the first console didn't have the rendering capacity to hire full-time artists. Obviously, it was the engineer who made the art most of the time. It was mostly because of the platform, but also because the industry was not mature yet. But very quickly, the 3D went in, and the capacity of the console allowed to have artists in the production team. But now what we see in the past few years with next-gen console and VR is the immersive art, where not only do you have artists, but you have specialist artists. You have a very large team. And actually, that's where Volta is coming from, because we do a very tiny part of the art pipeline. But there is a need for that, for this kind of rich art. What is exactly concept art as opposed to art? Because we're not craftsmen, we are artists. But we are artists who tell a story. We are artists who have to find solution to problems. That's the difference. So concept art started with industrial design. It was not called concept art at the time, but it's pretty much what it was. To find visual solution to problems, but also functional solutions. Then in movie, I think it's probably the first time the term concept art appeared was in Snow White at Disney. And they started hiring concept artists to create the mood of the movie and create visual solution to tell the story. So it's always around finding a solution that works and telling a story. Then you had that for automotive business, and now in video game. Most concept artists are working for video game nowadays. Concretely, this is 2D art. This is not 3D, by the way. And this is exactly what I mean about concept design. We have to design something, for example, on a game that is sci-fi, so everything has to be designed. And you see the level of quality that is required. It almost looks 3D. It almost looks like the 3D in-game asset, but this is 2D. So this is indication for the team, so they can see very clearly what will be in the game in the end. So an asset like this don't only require rendering talent or skills in drawing and perspective. It requires also artists who can think. And that's what we are, actually. It's being the architect of the game is what concept art is about. And the reason why we have more and more business in that with the new console is because you need more detail, because as I shown before, there's more detail in the engine. So we have artists who can think, and artists will find solution, but also artists will put the indication that are necessary to, for the production art team. So for example, an asset like this one can take 3 days for an artist to create, and there are thousands of assets like that in a typical AAA game. It's the same for 3D. If you look at the 3D for PS1, a typical 3D character had 1,000 polygon, and now it's 75,000 polygon for PS4. And for those who don't understand what I mean about polygons, it's more about pixel per inch, if you wish. So you have a better definition. All the curves are more detailed, but also you have to add more detail on the face. If you look at the the character for PS first, the first version, there was very simple character, triangle face. Now it's very rich and detailed faces. So not only it has to be well designed, but also you have to render it well to not make it look awkward. So those are two characters that we made for the latest Street Fighter. So this is about 75,000 polygon each. I have a case study here to explain another place where we can help with concept design. We worked with Telltale Game to create a new character for Game of Thrones, the game, of course. So most of the characters in the game were based on the TV show, but they wanted a new character that was not on the TV show. So we had to create a character that is believable, not only a random character with a face that doesn't look real. It has to look like a possible actor. So the first step we made was a bunch of thumbnails. So we did maybe 20 faces just to try to find something that is believable, an expression, a personality. Then we go on to more detailed face. Sometimes we'll start with a very with a full body and the shape for the character. Sometimes it will be only the face. In this specific case, we focused on the face because this was the main problem we had to solve as concept designer. And then after that, how it can be reflected in 3D and not lose the essence of the character. So we have a 3D team at Volta as well. And at Keywords, we have a tremendous amount of people able to do production art. So what we did in this case was to test and see how it will look in 3D. So we had a 2D artist making a turnaround for the character. Then we tested the modeling to see if we can keep the character alive. And of course, we had limitation in the number of polygons we have to put on the character. So in the end, we tried it. So this is pretty much the pipeline of what we're doing on the concept phase. What's interesting now that we joined Keywords is that we have that access very early at Volta with the concept design. Concept art is really the first stage of the creation for the art of a game. So we're the first person that the client will call. And very often we will do the pre-prod asset, the benchmark, but after that we lose touch with the client and we started to work on marketing. But now it's completely different. With Keywords, we can provide everything. But not only can we refer another studio, but we can work together and make sure that we keep the vision clear. So we can cover all the holes that we had in that pipeline now. For example, if a client comes to see us and he wants us to create at Volta a AAA character, for example, then Keywords can jump in after we create the benchmark asset and use the capacity of Mindwalk and Laxia, for example, to create the production asset. And then after, we can work with Liquid to create a cinematic and make marketing art with Volta. So we cover all the pipeline now. And I have an example of a project on which we worked right before the acquisition. So that gives you an example of what we could have done and what we do now. So it was for Nonstop Night. This is a marketing art that we did in the end for this game. So this was the old design. So at first, the client approached us, Flare Games, to redesign their character. So this was the only assignment. We have this character, we don't like it, we'd like you to revamp it. So we created that new character. Then they said, OK, can you create the character in 3D? Because we really like what you did in 2D. So we created the benchmark for the 3D. Then we made a cinematic, which is marketing.
Download for free. Available on iPhone and Android.
So for this, Volta was an excellent partner. That's what we are good at. So Flare Games were very happy, and they came to us because they wanted after in-game production assets, 3D assets. So you made a quote. We're not in Keywords yet, so the quote was too high. And also, we didn't have enough artists for the demand they had. We are a small team. So if we were with Keywords, which we are now, we could have had Mindwalk and Laxia jumping in and taking it from there. And it was a huge project. It was just not fitting with the business model of Volta. So this is why it's very interesting for the future. And it's already happening, actually. Since only 3 months, a bit over 3 months, we joined Keywords, we had all these opportunities and way more that came in. For instance, we discovered that Volta was working for a year on concept work for a client for which Mindwalk was doing the 3D on the same assets. Now that we knew that, we could work together, we called the client together, and we created value for the client. So that means more business and more trust. We had another project on which Volta is doing the art direction, and we managed to have Liquid doing the production art. And those are only 2 examples. We have a lot of other examples with only 3 months in the family. So I can tell that it will continue like that, and not only from Volta, but from the other studios as well, because we all have very close relationship with our client. That's something very specific to art, but that's the only way we can build a company in the art business, is to have the trust of our client. So once they trust us, we can give business to the other companies. Any question? Yes?
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about how a client might achieve the result you're doing in-house? So, I mean, if we go back a few years, was it the case that the art design was easy enough to do in-house and now it's just too complicated? Is that why you're seeing this outsourcing?
Most clients have an in-house team for concept design, and they are pretty senior. So it's not a question of we're better than them necessarily. In certain cases, yes, we're better, but I would say that in certain cases, they are as good as us. But they cannot maintain a huge team of concept art internally for a simple reason. This is a specialist job. So if you have a very high-skilled concept artist, you don't want to be put on hold for 6 months after he did the pre-production. And what we do in concept art is pre-production. So if you have several projects on which you work, you can maybe shift him on a project or another. But after a certain time, you cannot build a team of 30 concept artists internally. And now the demand for concept art is not only because it's more difficult, but there's more work to be done. And no studio will staff 30 concept artists internally. So this is one of the reasons why they come to see us. And also the fact that we only do that. We have specialists, for example, who can do incredible vehicles, and other specialists that do incredible character or environment. So we can just shift our team. I have an artist for 1 week on character, another week it will be another artist on vehicle. So this is more flexibility for quality.
Is the art assets that you produce independent of the game engine that the client is using?
I would say not entirely. We have certain guidelines, but at the concept phase, what is the most important is to come up with something unique and fresh. I would say mostly for rendering capacity. Of course, we know if we have to come up with very simple character because they need to be modeled after with very little polygon, but that's pretty much all that we have to take care about. It's not really technical. The part where we work, at Volta, because if you talk about Mindwalk, Laction, Liquid, that's different. But for Volta, it's only about creativity and I would say laying the architect job of the game. Thank you.
Well, nice to be here today and to talk to you about our art business. I would add a quick part to the answer to the first question that was answered. One of the things that we see within the studios is the recognition that even if they have the best artists in the world, they're only using it for a portion of the time, yet they're funding that artist on a 365-day-a-year basis. So one, you end up with a cost that's really hard to blend efficiently over a full year. The second thing is you're very much then completely committed to that one individual or those three individuals. And one of the things working with an external partner like us is we can bring a large quantity of artists, and we can bring a variety of artists. So one thing that Claude does often is we won't have one artist working on a project. We'll have multiple artists, especially on the thumbnail process. We'll bring 3, 4, 5 artists in and have their concepts come in and be part of the thumbnail process. Then the client will narrow down which they like the best, and we can narrow down to the artist that is best responding to that particular project for that client. So it's really much better to work with someone that can bring a lot of resources and varied resources that give you more choice, and especially in a creative process. So that's one of the things we see going on in the industry. Okay, and I'm going to get into this, but if we really go back in the history of the art business, you know, it was built up, and we talk about the movie industry, but it's back where, if you remember in the movie industry, cameramen, actors, everybody was an employee. Well, we saw the exact same trends going on in the game industry in the beginning. Let's load up studios, let's put 1,000 people in a room, we'll make a game. Well, if you look at the history, we see times where there's huge successes and they're big and they've made a lot of money, but there's also many a story where 500 people worked for 3 years and didn't produce anything in the end, and all that cost gets sunk and all that cost gets buried. And from a business model, that's not a very good long-term process. So what we see and what we're experiencing is a tremendous embracement of external development partners, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit from the art perspective. So let's talk from the art perspective about industry-wide growth. Things that are really impacting us, the first factor is on continuous content creation. We've gone from video games to be something that you did, you copied, you put it in a box and you sold it at the store. Video games aren't sold that way anymore. They're sold online typically. They're not usually just a captive game. Typically they're a game that you get and then you can get additional content. So it's turned into a model of not just creating something and selling it, but creating an environment, creating a relationship with players, and you need to keep feeding those players. So this continuous content is really important because you need somebody that can continuously keep producing more and more art, especially if you're a studio, which is, you know, we need to move on to the next major version of this, or we need to move on to the next game, because that's how we're going to survive as a game studio. Who's going to keep feeding our market? Who's going to keep feeding our clients? I need external development partners that can continue with additional content. And that content needs to be created at a cost model that makes sense, right? It needs to be, I can invest this for additional content. I can get a partner like one of our companies to produce it. It's a good business model that makes sense, okay? The size of the engines, the size of the environments that are taking video games just means, as Claude has already pointed out, we can do a lot more. He talked about the size of an individual asset, 1,000 polygons to 75,000 polygons. But it's also about the number of assets. So there's a little bit of a competition going out there. Is you got to have a pretty rich game. You can't afford to just put a few really good looking assets, because the players are not going to respond well, because across the street somebody else has made a game with a lot more assets. So this is, in other words, a little bit of a content game, a war, if you will, out there. Better game, more content, more environment. And the thing is, there's just more and more digital content going into games. There's a proliferation of game platforms. Andrew already spoke about this, but not too long ago was a PC and some early consoles. Now we've got PCs. We've got lots and lots of mobile games going on. We've got laptops. We've got tablets. Games are being played everywhere. And one of the big pieces here is games are being played by everyone. If you sat in this, we had this discussion 7-8 years ago, we'd be predominantly talking about 18 to 35-year-old males, okay? We are not talking about that anymore. This is a very broad business with a very broad audience. Okay, so that's what's going on in the trends that impact us in the industry. In terms of support by somebody like us, which we call ourselves external development, the complexity of art, I talked about that. It's really impacting us. Broader range of services. One of the things that Claude's company does is concept art. As the companies, studios embrace the idea of using external development partners, they tended to embrace it with very low-end assets. Let's take the safe assets and give them. And they still kept their pride, and they still kept the creative juices inside the studio. It's been very slow to come out, but as they've learned that we are good at what we do, as they've learned of good partners, they more and more are bringing us more and more of what I call their children. They allow us to be in the early designs. They allow us to be in the art style designs. They allow us to work with the big, most important characters, the big, most important assets. And that's what's coming out to us now. So it's a real... it's really broadening our services, and it's broadening the kind of work that we do for them. And then the final thing that's really happening is, as we become partners, true partners, there's much more emphasis on integrating systems. It's integrating the people systems, it's integrating the technology systems, because more and more we really are a full-level partner. We're not a vendor. We are a development partner. So Ashley will talk a lot about this, but where we actually integrate, we actually deliver assets directly into their game engines, directly into their build, because we're a full-fledged partner with them. Let's talk about the evolution just for a brief minute. If you go back and say outsourcing of art started somewhere around 2000, it really started in the 90s, somewhere where there was truly some going on. Here's what it looked like. In the beginning, it was two things. Solve a problem for me. I don't have enough capacity in my studio. I need to get somebody just to build some assets. And what was built was very cheap, lower end, kind of what you would expect to throw out or give out to a vendor if you couldn't do it yourself. The second one was, I've got a big problem with what's going on, and because I have a big problem with what's going on, I've got a fire. Can somebody come help us? So we get a phone call. So this is what we were doing, frankly, in the late 90s and 2000s in this business. But as that happened, and as we did good work, frankly, as an industry and as companies like ours, they came back to us and said, well, that worked out pretty good. You're not we trust you. And let's see what else we can do together. So we became a trusted partner of these companies. And maybe we were only trusted so they'd call us the next time they didn't have enough capacity or they had a problem. But at least we were a trusted partner. Our reputation went up. Well, then as a trusted partner, they would run into situations where I don't have enough of this, or maybe my artists aren't capable of doing that or whatever, or maybe I just don't have capability within my company. We start getting calls like, hey, could you do this? You did really well on that, could you do this? And so all of a sudden we're getting expanded opportunities. And as we did more and more work, then it started becoming an obvious business solution is how can we do business better together? And that led us to integration, and it led us to integrating systems. And we're full-fledged, all of our companies are really involved in integrated relationships with our clients. Well, that then has led to pre-production, and pre-production for us is thinking about the game, designing the new game, doing tests of concepts of new games, and that gets to the heart of a lot of the studio partners. And that used to be something that was hard for them to really share because it's part of their identity as a company. But as a trusted partner, they've invited us in more and more, and as Claude showed, they even take one of their characters that was very important to that mobile game, by the way, and had it redesigned by an outsider to make it better, and it is better. And as a result, they've got a better game, and that game's doing really well. And where we are right now is we're now hearing from our clients is, we not just want you participating in our builds, and when I talk about a build as a game build, or often we talk about a level build, which would be a whole section of a game, but now they're coming to us and saying, we're gonna build, our internal team's gonna build these 3 sections, but we want you to just take on section 4. And since you have concepting, we want you to imagine that 4. We'll give you some guidelines and we'll work together with our design team. But how far could you go to think about it, design it, get concepts for it, just come up with the asset list, make the assets all the way through the production cycle. And that's where we're sitting right now, and we're having dialogues right now with some very major partners about that kind of delivery service. And if you think about that, just how integrated and how trusting that relationship must be to be a full production partner like that. By the way, we're going to refer in here, you're going to see several slides that refer to a source of XDS. XDS is an external development summit held in Vancouver each of the last 4 years. It's a collection of people in the industry, predominantly art, but some of the other keyword services as well are represented there, but it's predominantly an art conference. And most of the major studios are represented there by those that buy external development services, particularly art. So these numbers come out of a survey taken during that conference of those buyers. Okay? But here's the services that our studios or the studios are interested in purchasing, and you'll see that 3DR and concept art represent 80% of the services that, as of September of this year, they were interested. But you can also see another major thing is programming, and programming here is engineering services. This is getting back to not building an engine, but often when you're putting art in or you're doing gameplay, and there's an engineering piece that goes along to having the art work properly, having the different levels perform the way you want them to perform. It's a space of both technical art and gameplay art. So they're asking for additional services. So I want you to see through this that we're really in the sweet spot right now, performing and providing what they want, but there's a lot of opportunity for us for growth as well. Why does a developer choose particular partners? Well, this was the answer that they gave. I mentioned scale. They want to scale their internal commitments to their resources. They want cost savings. They're learning, and we've demonstrated to them that, frankly, we're better at producing art than they are. That's not their job. Their job is to produce a video game. Our job is to produce art. So actually, we're better. We're more efficient. We're more effective. So they actually end up with cost savings by coming to us to have them produce art for them. You can see the other reasons there. One of the things that I want to really make a clear point here that I have a strong belief about is, from a financial viewpoint of a studio making a video game, working with an external development partner takes a fixed cost that you've committed to, labor in a studio someplace that you must pay, to a variable cost, an investment in a video game that you've said, I need X amount of dollars to produce X amount of art, in this case, for a game. It's a very big shift in making an investment and running a studio. But from a financial standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. You're making an investment that you expect a return out of versus you're building a studio, and then you've got to figure out how to keep that studio running and get dollars through that to make a return on that fixed cost expense. So it's a big shift. And it's one of the reasons I think that we're proving to be very successful and our future is very bright, because as people start to do this, it changes their whole budget cycle, it changes their whole investment, and it changes how they view the staffing of their studios. Second comment over to the right there, 94% of the people surveyed in this particular survey expect to work with the same partners that they've already done work with. So this is all about relationship, and it's about being an external development partner, not a vendor. So what are the three things that have them choose a particular partner? Quality, cost, credibility. I will tell you right now that we make great art. You saw some of it. I will also tell you that's not a differentiator. That is a standard that we have to do. If we don't make great art, we're not in business. So I'm not going to sit up here and tell you we make better art than anybody else. We make great art, okay? Cost, we have to be competitive. It's a market-driven business we're in. We have to be competitive from a pricing standpoint. I'll tell you that we are. Again, it's not a differentiator. Credibility. This is where Keywords and the studios that we've collected have differentiated themselves and why they're successful. It's about the relationship. One of the things to understand about art is that there's an emotional, subjective piece of valuing the art that is delivered. It is art, and therefore it is driven, among other things, by emotion and by my own personal reaction, and that includes the people that we work for. Okay, the studio director, the art director, the person that's creating that game may have told us that they want a tall warrior, who cares, you know, an Indian warrior, all right? He wants a big spear and everything else. And he will tell us that very specifically. But in his heart, he knows when he sees that artist, when that art has been created. He'll know when he sees that person. Our job is to give him a piece of art that when he sees it goes, that's what I was thinking about, okay? That there's a subjective piece to that. There's a very human piece to that. There's technical making good art, you bet. But as Claude said with the Game of Thrones character, we could make a Game of Thrones character that wouldn't make sense to the audience of Game of Thrones or to the people that are directing Games of Thrones. It would be great art, but it would be worthless as an art asset. Okay, so very, very important to understand that relationship between an external development partner and our clients. Okay, we have two models, and it's one of the strengths of our company. Our businesses, the four businesses that are together, two of them are built on a freelance artist model. And a freelance artist model was, both those companies are North American companies, so they have high labor costs. Both of them have extremely high level leadership, extremely high level art leadership, very high quality artists in a core group of people. Both businesses were built around then recruiting worldwide some of the best art talent in the world. But that is freelance art talent that doesn't want to live in a major studio area like a Los Angeles or a London or a Tokyo. They want to live wherever they want to live, as many creative artists, creative people do. Both companies have spent, in Liquid's case, 15, 16 years, in Volta's case, 7 or 8 years, recruiting artists that want to work for them, but they want to do it from their home. Okay? So we have a very large 200 to 300 network of freelance artists that work for the companies. The beauty of that model is that we have this huge population, so when somebody comes along and says, can you make one of these, we can think about who could really do a good job on this, and we can put the right artists on the job. And because we have artists all around the world, that means we have many different cultural orientations. If you think about that, art is also driven by cultural orientation. So we have Eastern Europe cultural orientation, we have Western Europe culture, we have American, we have Canadian, we have South American, we have Japan, okay? We have artists all over the world, so we can get the right match to it. The other beauty of a freelance model is in the freelance model, the artist is paid to do a single piece, a specific piece of art. Therefore, there's a direct correlation between the cost of getting that piece of art done and what that art is sold for, and it's very controllable, okay? Joe, will you do this? Will you do this for $200 US? Yes, I will. Client, I'm going to sell it to you for X amount. Cost stays in control. Selling price stays in control. Very clear from a business standpoint. Okay? No waste, no inefficiency. The key competencies it takes to run that. First of all, really skilled leadership at the project management, at art management, at company management. We have to have the art network, and that's not easy. Liquid's taken 16 years to build theirs. Volta took 8 years. Claude has a reputation, he won't say this about himself, as being one of the best concept artists in the world. So you're looking at one of the best concept artists in the world. But what he did with that, he originally was a guy that was doing freelance by himself. And what happened is everybody wanted him. Well, there's only so much Claude to go around, so Claude brought a couple of their buddies in, and all of a sudden there was Claude and his buddies, right? But it's still Claude. Well, then all of a sudden he had a business. So Claude has been able to attract some of the best concept artists around the world because it's a very small club. There are very few really, really good concept artists. and they all know the reputation of Volta. So what he did is said, you want to be part of us? Great. And he's built up a freelance concept artist network around the world of people that want to work with Claude, that want to be part of Volta, and want to do the wonderful projects that come through Volta. That's how he built his up. But you have to be able to do that. You have to have that network. It's not a matter of going out on the internet and saying, anybody want to draw this? Because I've got $200, I'll pay you if you'll draw it. That's not it at all. You recruit the same way you'd recruit as an employee. The difference is you recruit an artist where they are and for the skills that they have. But you go through portfolio lookups, you do tests. It's really a very skilled group. Finally, you have to have systems that allow you to work with a variable workforce. Okay? And both companies have got the ability to keep client connected, keep art community connected, and project manage at the same time. So the second model is studio artist model. And this is where we literally do have a studios full of artists. They're in lower labor cost markets. In our case, we have 2 studios in India, and we have a studio in China. The beauty of those particular 2 markets is they both have the ability, they both have a large artist community, not necessarily game artist community, but we have large artist communities, and we're able to bring them in and into a fixed environment. We're able to train them. We're able to offer large solutions to our clients out of those studios. The key competencies required is hiring, sorting the good artists from the bad artists, and then training. And you'll hear from both of these, both Manvendra and Ashley, when they speak about how important training is, and we have the competency and the ability to actually train artists to be really good game artists, not just good artists. Project flow and workflow, because now we're managing efficiencies, we're managing fixed labor commitments. We've got to make sure those are utilized. We've got to make sure we've got work going through there. And we've got to manage quality control, because now we need to make sure that every single piece of work coming out of the studio is of a consistent quality. But our studios have the ability to do that. So at Keywords, we have both models. The beauty of both models is we can mix and match, and we can, for whatever the situation, we can meet it. So when a studio comes to us and says, I need 30 artists for 6 months, and I'm willing to commit, and I'll sign a contract that you have 30 artists available to do this kind of work, we can set that aside, we can have that, and we can sell it that way. When a studio comes to us and said, I need to have you help me make 3 key assets for a game, and we're going to work through it very slowly, we can go ahead and work that with individual artists using the freelance model. So we have the ability to deliver both ways. And in both cases, we're very capable of making a good return from doing that. Here's our locations currently. We're in Seattle with a studio, Portland with a studio, Quebec City with a studio, and then over in Asia, we've got Beijing, New Delhi, and Pune studios. And then we have offices in both Singapore and Tokyo where we have leaders. We have project management and art management there, which helps us have a very close touch with some of our customers. And it also helps us work around the globe. One of the things we can do in art is we can actually work art around the globe, because often we get direction from client in that time zone, and then the artists can go off and work. We can have artists working around the clock. By the time we come back to the time zone, we can deliver either here's what it looks like, or we can show progress on that asset that's been worked on around the globe. So it's actually a very solid model. Here's what our pool looks like today. We started with 200 artists in Laksha, then we've increased, and today we're just a little over 900. I will tell you this is not enough for the demand that we're seeing, so you will see this number go up. This number does represent a balance of both our staffed in-studio staffing as well as our contractors. Why engage Keywords specifically? I've already mentioned we have a broad range of artists and project leaders. We have really well-trained teams, really, really well-trained teams. And then we have excellent process controls, production systems, and quality control. So that number one, quality, we meet that all day, every day. Ashley's going to talk more about that when she gets to producing art. Cost, the 2 models that I mentioned, that really allows us to go to market and be very competitive. Our job is not to be the cheapest. That's not what we do. We want to be value. We want to sell for good value, for good external partner relationship, and we're very capable of doing that. We're very efficient, as I mentioned, with a worldwide labor force, and that's only going to get better as we get better at collaborating together and working together as a team. And then we have industry-leading production practices. We really are, in many cases, doing things a bit differently. In the case of many of our competitors, they ran to Asia to get low-price labor so they could have low-price costing. That's different than running a production business. That's different than being really good at what you're doing, getting systems that set up a long-term business model. And you'll see when Ashley makes her presentation that we're well down the road of doing that. Finally, credibility. The companies, all 4 companies have very high reputations in the industry, and I think Andrew's done a careful job of figuring out which companies to bring into the Keywords Group. But each of us knew of each other, and we each had respect for each other before we became all one. And we've got some of the best companies in the industry. The 4 studios, the top 10 customers, for those 4 studios, 35 of them are unique. The way you do this business is becoming an external development partner. You form a very close relationship that is very sticky and very long-term. And what each of these companies did individual as smaller companies was create a set of those relationships. What we've done with Keywords now is we've brought a large number of those relationships together. But we're not overlapping. We're ending up expanding our connection to the industry as a whole. So where are we going? Here's our growth opportunities. First of all, current production. We need to add to our studio artist model. That right now is in the about 600 to 700 range. Okay, we're going to need to get north of 1,000. I don't know how much north of 1,000. I'm not sure yet, but I can tell you we need to get bigger than we are right now. We need to add capacity in China, not only because China is a rich market for what we do, but predominantly now we take work in China and we take it elsewhere. The Chinese market alone is a huge opportunity. Okay, it's early stages. It's a big market, but in terms of what we do and how we do, it's early. I back up, if you remember that progression of how I showed how we've evolved, I put them back a couple of steps, but we recognize where they are, and we want to join that now and grow up through it. So there's a huge opportunity in China. Then one of the biggest opportunities we have right now is those 35 relationships. Well, we have an opportunity to bring the total sum of what we have available now in the art group into the other relationships. So we take the 10 top customers or the 40 customers at Laksha. We now can bring services that may not have had, or we can bring capacity they wouldn't have had from one of the other studios and deliver it through. And Claude gave some examples where that's already happening just in a few months of putting this all together. European studio. I may have already mentioned that, but if you looked at our map, it's kind of missing. So we'll be looking for opportunities to have a studio in Europe. Services expansion, things that we want to add to our service offerings right now is more emphasis on visual effects. Cinematics, what you saw was what's considered an out-of-game cinematic or a marketing cinematic. There are also cinematics in-game. For those of you that are gamers, you come along and all of a sudden they'll run a video. That's an in-game cinematic. Our companies have done it. They've done it in very small amount, and they've done it typically with using a series of outside partners to do it. We like to develop some more internal capacity, and because we serve such a broad market, we've got an opportunity to offer that as a service across the whole population of clients that we have. User interface. User interface obviously is literally the dashboards and things that go on in games and stuff. It's a very specialized piece of visual design. We'd like to add that. We get requests from our clients, and all of us have to say, no, we're really not specialists in UI, but if we could find the right team and add it on, we'd have more business immediately from that. I already mentioned engineering and how that could be a real add-on for us. And then I talked about the domestic Chinese market. So hopefully that wasn't too long. Questions?
Do any of the developers ask that you work exclusively for them in any respect?
Oh, that we become exclusive to them? No, I've never had that respect. No, it wouldn't even be a corollary of that. I would say, no, that doesn't happen. They do say, I want you to take a dedicated team, or even sometimes they say, I want you to take a dedicated space for confidentiality reasons, like a space in the studio. They'll do that, but it's not, I want you to take your company and do it. Yes?
Quick question. Given that all 4 divisions are in different geographic locations and the types of projects that they work on are all different, and obviously there are a lot of cross-sell opportunities, how do you ensure that communication between all of the 4 divisions are seamless and that you're unlocking all possible cross-sell opportunities? So
let me say back to you what I think what I'm hearing you say. Are you talking about each of our art companies and how we're collaborating between them? Well, first of all, I'll tell you it's early days. Okay, as you know, 2 of the companies have come to us in this calendar year, but what we're finding the approach we're taking right now is the relationships that exist, and even the relationships we're growing, are driven by the company that has that relationship. What's happened very quickly is we've made contact between each of the CEOs and their leadership teams between each of the studios, so there's collaboration going back and forth. We are very much headed towards systems that would allow the availability of capacity in certain areas to be visible without having to make a phone call to be online. We're very much understanding that's a very critical part of where we're going. One of my main roles right now, frankly, I don't operate the business. I've got incredibly competent people, which you've already met one of them. You get to meet a couple more of them. My job is actually addressing some of these kinds of issues, and some of it in a very physical way, emails and getting people on phone calls and stuff to make sure if opportunities come along that we're connecting the dots right now.
Question on pricing.
Yes.
Could you just over the last, say, 5 years, just give us a feel for whether this is a heavy price down market for, let's say, a 75,000 polygon character? Has the price come down a lot over the last 5 years? And secondly, as you go through that evolution of problem solver to trusted partner, does that give you more leverage to name your price, or in actual fact, the client is the client and he still pays your wages? So,
well, I wish I had a chocolate bar to give out for the best question, because I'd hand it to you. Part of your answer will come when Ashley gets up, because she'll actually show you a chart that answers specifically your question about as we move up the price as Eternal Development as a more trusted and connected partner, our pricing opportunities actually go up. So that's the right question. To ask you the trends. So there's two things that drive price in the industry. One is a man day or artist cost per day is kind of a standard, and those vary depending on region. There's an expectation of what you would pay for that kind of service out of an Asian studio. There's an expectation of what you'd pay for that kind of service, say, in a North American studio. But the key with going from 1,000 polygons to 75,000 polygons is how many days does it take to create the character, okay? The rate per hour, if anything, in the high volume areas is going up, not down, okay? So if we went back 5 or 6 years, the man day rate being charged out of China or India or Vietnam were lower than they are today. I'm not going to suggest they're going to keep going up, but they're not going down. The number, we used to do a pretty standard character for a AAA game in 4 weeks or less. I've seen characters now on a AAA game that are 8 to 10 weeks of work. Okay, so you're multiplying it times the man day rate, but in other words, the studios are investing quite a bit more. There's a lot more dollars going into this art, yeah. And then there's the one other piece about looking at a game. There's a lot more art. If you were going to put 25 pieces in a particular room 7, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, you probably are putting 150 pieces in that same room now, just by what's expected. Okay.
Thank you, Fred, for that lovely presentation. 2 questions, really, one by one. First is, when you have these freelancers working for you, and in the social media world, obviously none of the clients want a particular character leaked out on Twitter. Have you had any such issues? Do they keep you awake at night?
No, those are 2 questions. So do they keep me up at night? No. I'll answer that one first. On the surface it says, wow, that could be a big problem, but here's what it looks like. In reality, one artist gets typically one asset at a time. Typically an assignment could be hundreds, if not thousands of assets. So your risk is you've got a wheelbarrow out here and artist A is working on it, and somehow artist A decides for whatever set of reasons they want to do it. Now, first of all, that has never happened to me or any of our companies. And I think I know why. That's the end of that artist's work in the industry. They're done. They're completely done. They'll never work again, period. Okay? So I think that's answering your question. Artists like to be very proud of what they do. The bigger problem we have from time to time is art is done, art is delivered, not from time to time. I've been in this business 13 years, and I think it's happened 3 times in my experience. It's the artist that wants to post a particular piece of art in a portfolio. They got it done, they got it delivered, the client had it a long time ago, but the client doesn't really want artists posting that they did it, okay? So typically when that happens, it pops up. Often we'll see it, we'll show it or something. We just have to get back to the artist and say, no, remember, you can't do that. You're going to make, you know, whoever mad. And the studios have always been great about it. It's never been a problem. But it's not we're creating something and now they're running off to sell it to somebody, or they're off creating something which destroys our relationship with the studio.
And of course, based on what Claude and what you said, I see many similarities between what you guys are doing and what the animation world did in terms of movies.
Yes.
And of course, that sector is littered with disasters in terms of companies really making money.
Yes.
You having been around for quite a long time, what are the mistakes they made which we are of course not going to repeat?
No, that's a really great question. Of course, I wasn't part of that, so I can only assume. But I think the thing that we have to do well, and we are doing well, is if we were here saying, trust us, give us some investment, we're going to run to China, and we're going to put a 3,000 we're going to put the biggest studio in the world there, and then we're going to run around selling everybody and tell them how great it is. That's not what we're doing. We're matching our capacities in both the fixed studio model and the variable freelance model exactly to the demand we're having. We are not going to build our fixed capacity to a level that exceeds the demand we're seeing from the marketplace, because the beauty of the freelance model is we can flex the freelance model in and out of demand as we need it. So we're going to build carefully, and we're going to build basically on the backbone of these external relationships. And I hope I stress that enough, but we're not sitting at our offices waiting for orders to come in. We're talking to our partners about what are you going to do next and what do you need from us. Does that answer your question? And I think that's our protection. We have to run our business well. We have to know what we're doing. But we have really good partnerships, and we know whether those partners are succeeding or not. We know if that last game really did well or not. Okay? And we have to plan ourselves accordingly.
Hi. I was wondering if you have a problem with churn in the freelance model, and also how you retain the best artists in that model.
So what I would say, I understand your concept of churn. I'd call it availability. And do we ever have a concern about availability? Because it's basically, we know Sheila. Sheila's been working for us a long time. She's in Holland. We get this job in, and Sheila's the one we want. Let's go get her. Is Sheila available is the question, okay?
You know, if you're an artist that's very successful, do they identify that and spin off and start up their own freelance model and
yes,
compete against
does that
it?
happen? Yes, it's happened, but the problem is it's not survivable, because what they find out is, and they can sell maybe even their own personal relationship. And by the way, there was quite a bit of that going on, where especially when the studios, some of the bigger studios had caps put on by their parents. You can only have 300 people, and they go, but I need 375. So then the studios were running out, picking up one artist at a time, right? On contractor relationships, right? But what happens in that to the artist is the artist then gets frozen in. For that period, they're employed, okay? They're not marketing themselves. They're not looking for the next job. They've got to keep their heads down and keep working. So then now they're done. Now it's like, uh-oh, they're not paying me anymore. Now I've got to go market myself. And that's what we find is the really good folks realize that it's much better to have a relationship with us, because we use all of our artists on a regular basis. And we get, not only do we use them, but part of being an artist is creative. And one of the things broken about the other model is if you're an artist in a studio, there's a day when you come in and you go, I just cannot work on this same game another day. I'm dying as an artist, okay? One of the beauties of working with one of our companies is just about the time you can't do any more World War II, we'll take you over and throw you onto a wizard game or something. I mean, from a creative standpoint, you can really have your creative juices and you can work on all kinds of assets, and it's very, very healthy. From a freelancer standpoint, one of the things we find, this industry can kill artists, can kill, the studio side is noteworthy for, we're going to get a game out in 2 years. And guess what happens for the first 18 months? Do you think they get 3/4 of the game built? Heck no, right? What do they get built in the last 6 months? 60% of the game. Well, what happens to all the people working on that? They're working nights, they're working weekends, they're just driving everybody to death, right? Well, what happens the Monday after the game's done? Yeah, you can take 2 days off, but be sure to be back in here, right? Well, that's a really tough work environment, right? What happens with a freelancer is freelancers still end up riding waves, because sometimes we end up on the bottom end of that wave, right, as a company. But when we do, our freelancers can go like crazy, but then they can say, you know what, I'm taking a break. I'll be back. And they let us know. Don't give me an assignment for the next week. I'm going to sit at home. I'm going to do what I'm play my own games, right? Then they say, okay, it's time to come back. And so they very much have control over their lives, and they make good money. And so they can decide how much money they want to make. They can decide where leisure fits in. Okay? So it works really well for the freelancers that like that business model. Okay? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, just quickly following up on that. In terms of competition for the freelancers' time, I'm just envisioning, someone could come along with a marketplace you see in various freelance professions, just basically matching clients to freelancers in a very low-cost model. So you can just talk through if that's happened in the industry already and how you differentiate yourself from that kind of very low-cost model, matching these people up using new technology.
So I'm not sure I understand your...
I mean, a pure marketplace, we need an artist for this, put a job on, people can pitch for it, that exists in other freelance markets. I'm just wondering whether that's a potential risk for your business.
No, I don't see that. We don't have a job board that says looking for a 3D artist. It's not this huge population of out there and let's go get one and let's bid for them. We recruit and go get those artists to have a long-term relationship with us. So we get people that what we're offering and how we're doing business and what they are going to do for us fits. And the businesses, Volta and Liquid that do this, are constantly recruiting. And frankly, what happens a lot is referrals. This artist who's having a really good time tells the buddy artist, you need to get connected with Liquid, and it's referrals. So it's not that kind of a supply and demand on the moment kind of thing. It's really more like an employment, a long-term relationship.
I think, Ben, your question a little bit is, can our clients go direct to freelancers? The answer is yes, they can, but why would they? Because they're missing this whole middle layer that in Fred's sort of diagram, that circle piece about we manage the artists. We're not just taking a piece of art and giving it to this guy and this guy's capable of delivering it back. We're doing 1,000 pieces of art at the same time. We're managing the whole art pipeline. We're managing the quality expectations, we're doing the project managing, we're doing the budgeting, we're doing the cost control, and we're guaranteeing the quality of the art delivery back. If the client just went straight to the market and asked for freelancers to come in, he's suddenly dealing with 50 different freelance relationships. He can't deal with that.
That's absolutely a correct answer. I'll tell you something else that we see. By the way, they do it, and it does happen. But one of the trends we're seeing in the last literally month or year, 18 months, is I see a lot of pressure coming down from corporations in the game business telling their studios to back off the contractor relationships. That's give somebody a year's contract, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of pressure on those kind of HR models and local jurisdictions in terms of what's a contractor, what's an employee, because we're hearing a lot more of it. We've had a couple of our major studios come to and say, where they literally have key freelancers they've been using, contractors, and they said, will you hire them? We'll hire them back. We'll use them through you, but will you hire them because my corporate won't let me do it anymore. They're putting them back down. Okay, I guess I got to go, so I'll be here afterwards. Thanks.
So we hand over to Ashley. Ashley, together with Mike, runs Mindwalk in China. So just the point to set the scene for Mindwalk in China. So Mindwalk is an art production company. It's based in China, but it's Western managed. And I think some of you guys asked me this question after we announced the acquisition of a company in China, saying, oh, isn't this a bit, how are you going to deal with the cultural differences and so on? Well, the answer is Canadian management company in China, access to great resources, really good sort of engineering approach to managing efficiency. So over to Ashley.
I'm actually Chinese as well.
Chinese and Canadian.
Chinese, Canadian. I'm going to try to answer your question regarding pricing. And I'm going to try to answer this gentleman's question regarding how, because I was at SIGGRAPH not too long ago, and they were complaining about the fixed price model that they have and how all of the external partners to these film studios were suffering. And I want to be able to answer your question, how the game industry is actually different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you under the hood. because you've talked about the macro situation with the game, and Claude is really passionate about art. I'm really passionate about Excel, okay? And I'm going to show you how we actually run a production studio, and I'm going to give you a peek into some of the tools and the processes and all the boring stuff, which I think this room is probably more have affinity to. So Fred talked about the value of external partnerships. I'm not going to, because he took a lot of thunder away from me, so I'm not going to talk about that bullet point. But I do want to stress that we, as a production studio, to our clients, we need to do art better than our clients. We need to be at the forefront of technology. As new software comes out, we need to know about them sooner than our clients. And that's something that we need to do, all four of us need to do, in order to stay ahead of the game, in order, as Fred says, to differentiate ourselves, because quality art is just table stakes. So to summarize, what makes a good art studio? How do you run it? I'm an engineer. Actually, I have an MBA as well. So I like to run an art production studio like an engineer. I like to use Excel. I like to look at the metrics. I like to look at the KPIs, and I like to play with them and see how we can get efficiencies out of them. And I'm going to let you go and take a look at how we do that. The second point is really manage these resources and utilization. As you saw Fred's pie graph, that beautiful pie graph, where we have environment art, animation, character art, these are all different skill sets. And within these categories, you have different levels of skill sets. So when a client asks you, hey, can you do this game for us? As managers of this production art, you have to know whether you can do it or not. And it's not a yes or no question. It's like a puzzle piece. It's like a puzzle. So you got to fit everything together. And I think inherently, because we've been doing this for over 10 years, right? Every one of us combined will probably have over 50 years of experience in managing that puzzle piece to make sure that it can all fit together nicely. Because the worst thing you can do is say yes to a client and you don't deliver. And that's something that we cannot do. We talk about attrition. I think there was a question in the audience about attrition, but it was about freelance. But the studio artist model, we need to manage attrition, especially in, Manindra has a lesser of that problem, but I have huge problem in terms of managing attrition in China. One of the reasons is where I'm in Beijing, most of the external partners are in Shanghai, so I'm sort of trying to manage that away. But it's a people business, and you want to have that connection with the people that you work with so they stay with you. Because the worst is they take all the skill set they've learned from you and walk out the door or go to your competitor. And last, I'm going to talk about integrated development. I think Fred alluded to that, but I'm going to go in depth with a case study. Okay. See, I told you I love Excel. This is a peek at how we do it. This is really a subset, if you can imagine, of what we deliver to our clients on a weekly, at a minimum basis. Some of them get even more. So everything you see here, we run the business by understanding every asset, where they are, what's happening, who's doing it, are they doing it well, do we have the feedback? And these are all the tools that we use. So we have trackers, we have Gantt charts. Everybody's familiar with Gantt charts. So you're telling the clients exactly where you get, when, and how you're getting the asset. And I love dashboards, because my Fridays are called Dashboard Fridays. That means every project manager in the studio has to have a dashboard. A dashboard is something that when a client sees it, he sees the entire project on one page. And we communicate that. So there's transparency. You're getting the clients onto the same page as you are. They see what you see. If they complain about something, you know exactly what they're complaining about. It's not a surprise. Okay? And the last thing I want to talk about, oh, by the way, we have code names for all our projects and clients. So this one happens to be Piggy. It's not very professional, but we're calling it Piggy. And this is called revision tracking. Revision is the enemy of our margins. If you don't understand revisions, you cannot run an efficient high-margin business. We have to understand why the revision happened, whose fault it is, do we charge them extra for it, Is it a prevalent revision that's in the studio? Maybe it's modeling, maybe it's animation that we need to have extra training for. So this is actually a really important piece. And we track each feedback, each revision that our clients give us to the minutia. My project managers complain about it all the time. And we track in both languages. Okay, so this is sort of a peek into a subset of tools that our project managers use to ensure that we have an efficient business. This is called a resource ramp. And again, it's a very powerful tool for us. Again, it's in Excel. And we've been tracking this way back from 2014. Now, this is not a linear. We've actually compressed the data from later on. We track this in real time, daily basis, sometimes even hourly. But we take a snapshot of it on a weekly basis, and we look at how the resources are spread across different disciplines. What's the idle situation like? If they're idle, are they in training? If they're in training, what they're being trained for? So all of these questions are answered in part by this tool. Okay, so this is actually real data. I'm not making it up, honestly. This is actually, you're seeing real data, and we're seeing a surge at Mindwalk Studios in the first quarter 2017. We understand because we are integrated and we retain resources, we understand what the upcoming work is. So we're actually having a large training bar here to get ready for that. And this is another tool that allows us to forecast, manage, to ensure that we have the right skill sets to meet the requirements coming up. Okay? I want to talk about China. It's a big country. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's the biggest market. China is a game nation, much more so than India. There's a lot more game players in China. What that translates to is there's a lot of people that love game art. And so this is again from XDS. So in terms of the number of projects that external partners are taking on, and the quantity of projects that external partners are taking on, China is number one. And incidentally, I don't know if Andrew planned this or he actually rigged the data to show that he's actually acquired the 4 companies in China, myself, India, United States, and Canada. So we're in the major markets where the talents are. And I think that's essential in terms of growing the business. This is where I'm hoping to answer your question, sir. So now you've had a peek of how we track projects, how we look at our business, how we sort of turn the dial so we can get the efficiencies. But how do we engage? How do we turn that unsolicited email into a long-term external partner? And I'm going to talk about pricing a bit, so hopefully I answer your question. So these are the sort of 5 simple steps. One is there's a partner qualification. Then we go into legal contracting. And then now that we have the legal framework in place, then we go into project assignments. And then we go into art production. And then we deliver to the clients. Okay? Partner qualification. It's a small industry. XDS has about 500 people attend it every year in Vancouver. And literally we know everybody. And the strongest, Mindwalk Studios, and I think it's pretty similar to the other studios, we don't really do sales marketing in the conventional sense. Most of our businesses come from referrals. It is the external partner manager that went from client A to client B and gives us a call and says, hey, I'm in client B now, and I really like working with you. Can you please work with us now? And sometimes they'll give you a test. It could be free, a free test where they don't pay you, and sometimes they say, well, you know what? If we use it in the game, we'll give you the test as a contract. And then after that qualification, and when you start doing the test, you basically know if you're going to be able to work with that client or not, because you're constantly talking, you're constantly communicating, you understand their needs, you can answer their questions before they ask it, and that is partner qualification. The next step is, okay, I really like you, now I want to have a negotiation in terms of what we call the MSA, or Master Service Agreement. So that document is like a marriage document, except there's a time limit on that marriage. It's usually about 3 to 5 years over multiple games. And it governs a number of things. It governs security, it governs pricing, it governs how long they would take to pay you, it governs if they pull projects away from you, what's the penalty, and so forth and so forth. And one of the things that's really important is if you are what's called a preferred service provider with that client, it's so hard to get you out of there. So as we go along this sort of the chain, this in-depth relationship, we want to become a preferred service provider. And most of these large clients like EA, Microsoft, they only have a few. And the idea is to work with them and to move up the ladder in terms of the value that you provide. And then project assignments. So now we have the master service agreement in place. And underneath, we can have projects, what's called a SOW, a statement of work. And when they give you a batch of work, you look at it, you price it. So one of the things with the movie industry, and they'll complain to you, they'll complain, is the fact that it's a fixed model pricing. 10 shots, this is what I need you to do it for, take it or leave it. A lot of them, when they take it, it's a losing business, and a lot of them do go out of business because of that. But for the game industry, it's more of materials and time. So we look at what the work is required, and we price it accordingly. Now, sometimes the concept artists will change their mind and say, well, you know what? I wanted a boat, but now I want a plane. Well, sorry, you still have to pay for the work that was on the boat. And because we have the tracking tools, because we have the revision tracking that's in place, we can have a very intelligent conversation with the client that says, hey, you know what? You wanted the plane first. Oh, no, you wanted the boat. Did I say boat or plane? Anyway, you wanted the boat first, and now you want the plane, but you still have to pay for it. And it's sort of industry standard that says, yes, that was my fault, and I'll pay for it. And that's the difference. I want to talk about a case. Fred talked about integrated development. What does that look like? And why is it important in our industry? And why does it, what I call making yourself indispensable? They can't live without you. And the case study I'm going to talk about is the Coalition, which is a studio in Vancouver. They built Gears of War, one of the most coveted titles in the industry. And they came to us because they wanted an integrated development relationship with their external partner. And before they came along, we actually been working with EA for 7 or 8 years as an external partner in an integrated manner. So they loved us. And because we're Canadians and they're from Vancouver, it's like, oh yeah, I want to work with you. So that's how we started working with them. And we started the relationship integrated. They actually gave us the Unreal 4 engine quietly. Because I don't know what exactly the legal term is, so I'm just going to say the word quietly, because then everybody knows what I'm talking about. And so much so that 2 years afterwards, when we talked to our other clients that says, we have this engine experience, and they're like, wait a minute, how did you get that? Okay, so, and that's kind of the relationship that you need with your clients to make sure that you are indispensable. The key thing in terms of becoming integrated is our artists, Mindwalk artists in Beijing, have the same development environment as the Coalition artists in Vancouver. In other words, I can pick up a Beijing Mindwalk artist and put them right in Vancouver. They wouldn't notice any difference. Okay, so we're just basically an extension of their team. And what does all of that mean? So this is going about as technical as I'm going to become in terms of these kind of in industry acronyms or words like game build access, ability to view assets in game. At the very beginning, when external development was done, it's called what's called the over the fence model. So they give you a spec, you do it, and then you throw it over the fence. You don't know what it looks like. They take it into in-engine, they look at it and they say, well, you know what, this doesn't look right. And then they give you a whole bunch of feedback, and then throw it back, and then you do it again. Sometimes it goes back and forth like 3 or 4 times. But if it's in-game, our artists can look at these assets in game. So before it hits to the client, they know exactly what it looks like. And most of the times they'll understand, oh, you know what? This may look good in Maya, which is a tool that we use, but if we put it in game, these are the actual revisions that's required. And then we do it. And then we don't throw it back to the client until that it looks good to us in Engine. And that's a huge, huge time savings and effort savings for our clients. Okay? Proforce, check-in, again, these are technical terms. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I think my time is also limited. As I said, with the coalition, we're actually working with them on the next title. So as new technology is coming on, they're developing their workflow. We're actually working together to build that workflow because they know they need us. They know that we're indispensable in their next game production. So we're actually working together to say, okay, what workflow makes sense for the both of us? We have scheduled client visits twice a year, training exchanges, and really this is the key because we're integrated, because we have their engine, we have always first right of refusal for follow-up work. And this is pricing. So obviously integrated art development is great for our clients. They get more value, but it's also great for us because this is a survey that's done with XDS. Normally we can command about 20% premium on the price, a per day price, over the fence model. Okay? And I want to talk about now that MindWalk, we came into Keywords actually on April Fool's Day. I was telling somebody about that. I had to stand up in front of the entire company to tell that we sold the company on April Fool's Day. Nobody believed me for about half an hour. But since we've been in the family, it is so good to be able to offer other services because MindWalk focuses on 3D. We don't do concept. We don't do 2D. And these gentlemen here do. So we're able to talk to our clients more about the services that we offer. But now it's sort of the other way around because they know that we're part of the group. They're asking us, hey, do you do concept? Can you introduce me to so-and-so? Can you talk to audio for us? Can you talk to localization for us? And it's actually a really great feeling. And I think this is sort of typifies what Fred is saying is because we have these really deep, entrenched relationships, they trust us. And they want us to introduce them to the other lines of services and Keywords. So that ends my presentation. How am I doing for time? Good. And I'm going to open up for Q&A. Yes?
Thank you. I'm interested in your comments about visibility because I suppose as a Luddite, one of the things which I've struggled with in the past has been things like console cycles and kind of lots of work coming on and then disappearing. And obviously you're gearing up for quite a lot more fixed costs. So when you talk about visibility in the market as a whole, is this sort of changing so that the method of gaming is mobile, so there's a lot more work continuously? Or do I have to think about it as the business is much bigger, so there's a kind of portfolio effect of clients, which means there's always work? Or is it all of those things? Or are you still exposed to peaks and troughs in terms of demand from clients?
I think all of your answers are valid, but I think that the second part of it in terms of diversifying your clients, diversifying the platforms, diversifying the style of the game, and so forth is important in terms of managing that utilization. And we're always talking to our clients. When a game is halfway through, we ask about the next game. When it's a mobile client, we ask them, so now that you got this game released, what's the DLC content that's upcoming? So it's always a constant conversation with the clients to ensure that that utilization rate is smooth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. So what derails your business plan effectively, I suppose, if we come back from another way? Is it just that the gaming market as a whole slows? Is that where we're at now?
I think every studio is different, so I'm not going to answer for them, but I will answer for MindWalk in Beijing. Because of our relationships, what really creates what we call idleness, where we create resources not being charged, is delays in terms of their readiness to start production. So because we have the conversations early with our clients, we know when they start and we get ready. Because, for example, with the coalition, they'll say, we'll start in January and I need 10 people. And we have those 10 people ready because you don't want to miss that train. But what happens is, because our clients say, well, sorry, we can't start in January, we're going to start in February, that's probably the biggest obstacle I see in terms of smoothing out that curve.
And what is your annual attrition rate then? Does that allow you to flex your staff effectively?
12.3.
Okay, thank you. That's very accurate.
I have a spreadsheet for you if you'd like to see it.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Now handing over to Manvendra, who's CEO of Luxure, and he's focusing on the story of how a company like Luxure joins Keywords and manages to transform itself through growth.
2 years back, Luxure was a reasonably successful company. We had a lot of ambition, and we were quite prepared for what we were aiming for. I said quite prepared, not maybe fully prepared. So why did we decide to be part of Keywords? We had a vision, and the vision was we really want to be one of the top game art services company in the industry. And over the period of 10 years, we started in 2004 until 2014, we had a very strong team. We had spent a lot of effort in creating that team. We had a very strong management, which means that we just don't have hands. We have hands who are guided. And one of the very key things for us, a really robust and comprehensive training structure. Along with all this, processes obviously are the first things. Like in India, a hangover of the BPO industry is all about processes. So that's the first thing that we also started working with. Okay, if we had to do something right, how will we do it? Not just get up in the morning and say, okay, today we are going to do this, but have a structure and a process for doing this. So we were prepared with all that in the past 10 years. But obviously, there were a lot of missing pieces to this whole story, which we wanted to create over the next whatever years we thought we'll be there. What was missing was the right exposure to what the global market really is. That was the biggest missing piece. We had a lot of good clients in US. We had a reasonable amount of success in Japan. But if you look at the overall industry as a whole, there were a lot of missing pieces in terms of, okay, we don't know about this, we don't know about this, and we don't know about this. Then obviously, being a reasonably small company with limited means, the reach that we had to access the clients, geographies, and publishers and developers was limited. And of course, the resources, which is what drives whatever growth and visions that you have, were also very limited. And last point, which is there, the gentle push. I think when you're running an organization as an entrepreneur, as an individual, a lot of times you say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Let me just go and watch this movie today. Now that's something which you say, oh, how does it matter? You know, if I do it tomorrow, that's fine. But then there's somebody, you know, who needs to like give you that gentle, there you go, no, not tomorrow, today. You got to do it today. So that is something obviously which is, I guess, is missing in all entrepreneurial ventures. You want to have a little good time also. And that's, I think, where I would say Keywords as a partner fitted right well into our perspective of how things could be. They brought in the global presence, the financial muscle, which was, I think, the key factor, because whatever you want to do, you need some money to do that. Yes, if you're successful, you'll have a reasonable amount of money, but not enough. There's never enough money. I think the key thing which made sure that we moved towards Keywords and shook hands with them was that after talking to Andrew and a lot of board members, Giorgio, Ross, we felt that collectively what we want to do is same. The perspectives might be different, but our end objectives were quite similar. We wanted to move in the same direction, and that is what made us realize that strategically this is the right fit. We could not have asked for anything more. We all had a vision to move in the direction of being the number one. We wanted to be the number one studio, and Keywords wanted to take a leadership position in the space of art services. It was a perfect match. And that is what motivated all of us at Laksh to join hands with Keywords, and which actually started a great journey for us. When we started in 2014, total size of team we had were 204. As of today, we have more than doubled ourselves. The revenues were 4 million, and we'll finish with about 10 million revenues, close to 10 million. That's a big jump for us in 2 years. The important thing for us was revenue per person, how much revenue every individual was generating. That increased substantially to almost more than 22%, which was because of the efficiencies we were able to bring in into the entire production process. And our Japan business really took off. I'll talk more about Japan business a little in the next couple of slides, but that is something which was really behind a lot of success that we have had today. And earlier we were just 2 studios, Gurgaon and Pune, and then we had another studio added to it, Seattle, which definitely would not have been possible without the support of Keywords. Now, quickly I'll talk about what is it that helped us take this success, helped us on the roadmap that we created for ourselves, which could not have been possible otherwise. The one important thing which we were able to do, otherwise we definitely could not have done, was set up our presence in Seattle and set up a studio, a development studio in Seattle, to support the expansion that we were planning or we were hoping that we could do in India. Because India has a lot of talent, raw talent is what I would say, but what is missing is the direction to that talent to make it into a game talent. That is something which really was missing, and that's the connect which the Seattle studio brought to us. And the other important thing which the Seattle studio was instrumental in was creating that connect with the client directly. And that is where the comfort level was created between the client and us, or the client was comfortable working with India. That was the key things which Seattle studio brought to the table. Second, I think, was the fact that the culture of the new environment that you walk into that defines what is it that you would be able to achieve. The culture, when I say culture, what I mean is the mindset of the people that you will be working with, the working environment, which will allow you to do this or not allow you to do this. And that, I think, is a key thing, because ultimately, if you are an entrepreneur and you are running a company, you have very definite ways of doing something. You want to do something. And if you walk into an environment where it is like, okay, this is what you have to do, go do it, and do it well. Great, we'll do it. The other scenario is where you have a discussion, you put in your points, you get your thought process together, you show the roadmap, you work out what you want to do, and the management says, great, sounds good, go do it. So now, what you're doing is not what you're asked to do, you are doing what you want to do. And that is where the big difference is. And that is the type of environment which I'm glad that Keywords as a group has built, where the responsibility, the onus of ensuring that we live up to the expectations is on us, because we are doing what we want to do. We have the goals which we have created. We have the objectives that we have said we will achieve. So now, as a team, as a group, as a company, we go all out and do what needs to be done. That is a driving force behind the success that Laksh has had, where we have driven down the road which we have defined and created because we want to. That says a lot about what is going to happen to any company. They have their own road to create and follow. The other important thing is that you are looking at growth, and growth doesn't happen just by numbers. It happens by people doing some work. It happens when you have enough trained people who need to do that work. And that is something which we were successful in creating training initiatives. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And that really helped. Other important part was the Japan market. That was the key to the growth that we had. because of the right resources at the right time, we were able to create and enhance the presence that we had in the Japan market. The last thing is that, like I mentioned a little while back, the Seattle studio actually opened a lot of doors for us. It created new relationships for us simply because it was there. It was right there in the backyard of all the clients that we wanted to get. That made a lot of things really easy for us to take forward. So as far as the client was concerned, they have access to and they're talking to a really solid team in their own time zones. And through them, they had access to this fantastic, great art talent in India. And that, I think, is the key thing. You have a huge capacity of work that can be done. And as a client, I don't have to worry about how to manage them. It is a lot of potential out there, but do I want to spend so much time in managing such large projects? Maybe not. But I will work through these people who talk my language, who understand my culture, who understand the nuances of what it takes to be there. And I don't really worry about, but my work will get done by this great team which has been built up in India. That's a fantastic thing that for any client would want. So I think that worked in our favor in a big way. Now, this is the Japan market. This is something I want to talk a little bit about simply because it is very different, it's very unique. It is not easy to enter and be successful in the Japan market. We spent 4 years, 5 years in just trying to be there, try and understand what it takes, try and understand their way of thinking, try and understand their nuances, their culture, how they think, why they think like that, and what they expect, without expecting any returns from their immediate returns, let's put it that way. And that was possible because to a large extent, we could afford that. Because we didn't have to worry about how will this happen, where will the money come from. And that is where the financial strength which Keywords provided, which they were behind us. They never questioned our motives because they knew that we were passionate and we will do what it takes to be successful. What they offered was, okay, we are here, let us know what help you need. So that worry which could have been there, especially in the Japan market, okay, 2 years, 3 years, how will we sustain this? That worry wasn't there. So in 4 years, average revenue from Japan, 450, 500, 550, and we were investing a lot of time, effort there. It was costing us. And 2016, that our revenue is 6 million plus. And that's because we spent that time and had the resources to manage what we had to do. And Japan is a relationship-driven market. You build relationships and they are your friends forever. So we knew that, we realized that, and because of the support we had, we could do that. Now comes the fact where the people, like I said a little while back, it's people who drive the business at the end of it, in spite of whatever financial muscle you may have. And India is not a very game-friendly market. It is not a market which has a lot of game talent. It has tremendous amount of art talent. Some of the best artists you can find in India. But you have to guide them, train them, hone their skills in this direction. And that is what we did by establishing our own in-house game learning institute. Because what we were getting from outside in private art colleges was not really up to the mark. So rather than taking somebody and then working with them for another 4, 5, 6 months before they can be of any use to you for your production, we got people who paid for the training, which is a good part, and at the end of it, because of the fact that we are the ones who created the curriculum, we are the ones who had the best of our artists as their faculty, as the trainer, at the end of the course, which was 6 months,